Okay, we have a call to order for the meeting of the Bartlett Economic Development Commission for February 14th, 2022. May we have a roll call, please, Tony?
Jerry Cabasco,
Here.
Kirsten Erickson,
Here.
Robert Perry,
Here.
Tracy Smandilla,
Here.
Joe Laporte is not here, Adam Lewinsky is not here, Michelle Hughes not present, Robert Gorski,
Here.
and on behalf of the Bartlett Area Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Paul Olson,
Here.
we have a quorum.
Okay, we have a quorum, so we'll move on to the next agenda item, which will be approval of the January 10th, 2022 meeting minutes. Do we have any discussion or comments?
Now, I've reviewed them, and I would move to accept the meeting minutes from the January meeting as presented.
Do we have
I'll
a
second.
second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Sounds unanimous. Next agenda item, number 4, public comments.
We don't have anybody on Zoom or the phone, or anybody here to comment tonight?
Up here, we have no public comments, so we will move on to number 5, Dogfather BEDA application.
Thank you. Seems like almost I really don't need to introduce the Dogfather or his business, but I will anyway. It's been one of the most popular eateries in the village for over 15 years now in the Apple Valley Commons Shopping Plaza. Mr. Pissaro's the applicant, the owner, the proprietor, the smiling face in the restaurant who knows almost everybody in town by name, and also what we like to order. He sponsors lots of community events, Little League, events sponsored by police, fire district. You can see him commiserating with customers when he's there. I used to think maybe it was just me because I worked for the village, but I would go there on Tuesdays for dollar hot dogs frequently, and I think pretty much everybody in line, he would come up and know the customers and call them by name, and just really a quintessential good small business owner in town. I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention that he was recently inducted into the Vienna Beef Hall of Fame this past November. It's no small honor. Had a bunch of Vienna Beef executives come out there, and Mayor Wallace and some trustees and various officials were there. Scott and I had the pleasure of going to that. It was a very nice and memorable ceremony just a couple months ago. So that's some brief background, not long enough, but very brief. His BEDA application, I often say that when these BEDA applications hit the local publications, a lot of times I get inquiries about it. We do our best, Scott and I and other people on staff, to make sure everybody knows about the program. And sometimes the best, marketing we have of it sometimes is when it hits the press. When people get sign BEDA grants like the Holterhoffs got recently, it resulted in a few more inquiries from businesses considering redoing their signs. For this particular application, the Dogfather, Mr. Pissarro, has a rendering in the packet of upgrading his sign, something that businesses do time to time to keep things fresh. I also want to mention it's from a Bartlett-based sign company, Mark Your Space, that you've seen a lot of BEDA grants previously that had signage from Mark Your Space. The estimate totaled $4,217. Of course, I had to subtract building permit fees from it because we don't essentially reimburse our own fees as part of a BEDA grant. So the sign project I considered to be $4,042. Due to his long-term success of this small business, Mr. Pissarro and his business, not just him, his whole business, a lot of his employees, do a lot of contributions to the community. You can see Dogfather at a lot of these events. It's a smaller scope project. Obviously, we're not talking about an entire rebuild of the restaurant. So we figured we would go up to the maximum grant amount, which you all know is 50%. And we've been doing that lately for the applicants who apply for signs. A couple of them in a row, we recommended 50%. So here we are, February 14th, recommending BEDA grant in the amount of $2,021. Of course, this is a reimbursement program, and so once the sign is already bought and paid for, all the permits pulled, installed properly, and then Mr. Dogfather will come in and show me the proof of payments made, and then we'll process this grant, of course, pending village board approval and any questions, comments, and recommendation by the EDC. And of course, he's here to answer any questions you may have.
No questions. I got a comment.
Could you turn the microphone on, please, Bob?
You hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, no questions. Just a comment. Dogfather has been a mainstay in Bartlett. We love his hot dogs, and we wish him well. And my only concern was that we couldn't give him more money.
I have a question, just kind of looking at the picture. So the removal needed the Dogfather, and then on the rendering, it's just Dogfather? Is that your intent, is to get rid of the?
There's a purpose behind that, because I have a sign limitation, square footage wise.
Okay,
So if you look at my building, my sign, because of the word "the" and a dog,
uh-huh,
it's small. It doesn't, so I'm just making it Dogfather.
okay,
Because I've been here 15 years, I think everyone knows who the Dogfather is right now. So I think that will still be visibility.
okay, yeah, I was trying to see if that was the intent, or if the picture was just done differently. Okay,
My sign has been down for the last 3 years. The person who sold me the sign when I first opened it up lied to me. It's not LED. You can't fix it. So
okay. Thank you.
Well, I'd just like to comment that, again, your commitment to the community, Tony, has been just, I think unparalleled when we think about our community establishments and restaurants that do support the community, like, our Little Leaguers and certainly the fundraisers you do for, everybody from school groups to scouts. So again, thank you for that. And again, it not just sings to your commitment to your business, but us at large. Reflecting on what Bob said, are you actually changing the scale of Dogfather to optimize that maximum square footage you get? Okay, great.
now it's optimized to that square footage, but because of the word "the" and the dog, it's square footage. So
Right.
I have a 20 square foot, I have a 20-foot opening, so that's the amount I get.
Yeah, I
Even
get
though
that.
I'd like to make it bigger.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think it's great that you're doing that, and like you said, everybody knows the Dogfather and who you are. I think that, just Dogfather speaks to it. But the fact that you can upgrade that to LED, which is, one, a cost savings, and two, from a maintenance perspective, I think it's a wise business decision, so.
Not supposed to only, because the other one, every once in a while, if it got too cold out, it just flicked. So I should have known something was wrong with that.
Sure. Yeah, well, I'm glad that you've taken advantage of the program.
And I'd like to further say that, we appreciate you also deciding to partner with another chamber business to get your business done. So we really appreciate that you'd seek out another chamber. It is.
He brings me business too, so he comes, he's like. But in reality, I got 3 different quotes, and these, by far,
Hey, he might have wanted you to have pay his rent.
If there are no further discussions, do we have a motion to approve the grant?
I make
So
a
moved.
motion to approve it.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And this will come to a village board committee meeting at an upcoming meeting, Tony, with the recommendation. Yep. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, next agenda item would be economic indicators review. Tony, you going to lead us through that?
Thank you, I sure will. This has become an annual report that I do every year. I think this is probably the 7th year. I didn't go back in my records, but I know we did a 2015 through 2020 marketing plan through the EDC. And just for a quick historical perspective, because I realize not all of you have been on the EDC for 7 years, but you've all been around the village for longer than that. And so you all recall, and I'm even want to thank also Paul Olson for filling in as the chamber representative tonight. And he can remember well when he was about 7 years ago, our downtown had a very high vacancy rate. It was, I don't know, 30% might be a little bit of a stretch, but we had done a TIF study at the time to consider doing a downtown TIF, and we found the vacancy rate was close to 30% in the downtown business district. The reason being that the 86,000 square feet of what we now call Streets of Bartlett, that is 100% occupied, used to be called Bartlett Plaza. And just before 2 years ago, it suffered by what we would call deferred maintenance, where basically everything needed to be replaced. And the grocery store was vacant, and the Ace Hardware was vacant or just coming in. Anyway, we had a high vacancy rate throughout town center. Just like now, prior to Bartlett Tap coming in, the building had been vacant for a bit. Long story short, we had a very high vacancy rate, and we spent a lot of nights at the EDC, and the village board spent a lot of nights, and we spent a lot of days in Village Hall meeting, strategizing on ways to improve the business climate in town. And I also want to mention it wasn't just the downtown when we embarked on this marketing plan. Also, Dominic's had recently closed. And if you all recall, that was vacant for a number of years before we ended up working with BEDA. So I remember the first time I did this report and talking about the high vacancy rates and different strategies we might be able to utilize and the weaknesses, key performance indicators, and different measurements. Like they say, you can't improve what you can't measure. So we started taking an annual look, taking a step back, where I always also like to say it's putting on the macroeconomist hat for one night for a micro-size economy, Bartlett, but looking at the economy as a whole rather than individual small businesses like we typically do. So we discussed marketing and incentive strategies about various parts of town, what we could do to encourage development of vacant land, as well as filling key vacancies. The overall economy, not just Bartlett, but throughout the whole country, the Chicago area, the entire economy has continued expanding pretty well since that time. And also the village has implemented multiple business-friendly programs. I mean, not saying that businesses wouldn't still replace signs, but some of the big changes that we've made, including to Bartlett Plaza, would not have been converted to Streets of Bartlett without the BEDA program. And we've implemented BEDA on some other big projects like 120 Live, like the one we had last month where Mr. Suffern was here upgrading the infrastructure for his building. So we've also done some sales tax sharing agreements, including with Culver's, the much-anticipated More Brewing project, and just a few months ago with the Bartlett Auto Mall out on Lake Street. And also, the Bartlett Auto Mall, we did the village's first Class 7 incentive. I also have to make note that we've done 2 Class 6 incentives in the last 2 years. Those are for those huge projects in the Cook County portion of Brewster Creek Business Park. And literally, it's something that we talked about years ago, about what strategies can we implement to complete the development of Brewster Creek Business Park. And here we are in 2022 with it being very close to completed. So I got to put my glasses on now. For industrial, the trend towards rapid distribution and last mile facilities has really, I'm not going to say that's completely driven the growth in the business park, but it has certainly contributed to it. I was talking with another village employee today about something I had to order for a computer last weekend that the big company that delivers same day did deliver to me in the same day, and that would have been probably unheard of 7 years ago. But here we are with people mostly shopping online when it comes to retail, and we have a lot of last mile facilities here in Bartlett and a few more coming. Also, a lot of the inner ring, what I call the inner ring older industrial areas, we get inquiries from businesses from places like Melrose Park, Schiller Park, Des Plaines, sometimes Mount Prospect, or some of the towns where they have older, more established industrial parks, but they don't have room to grow. And a lot of these companies also wanted to do build-to-suit projects, and they wanted to leave Cook County. So we've benefited from that greatly over the past few years. The ongoing strength of industrial is one of the reasons, also one of the things I say often here at EDC, and we saw it in our tour of the business park in August, is over the past, I'm going to say 5 to 6 years since we did this plan, started attracting institutional developers with institutional investors, people who develop $100 million, $500 million, $1 billion worth of real estate in a year, like the company that did the 2 speculative buildings at Stearns and Munger is a great example of a company that does probably 1 or 2 new buildings a month. And they build in Singapore, and they build in Asia and all over the whole world, logistics property company. So, of course, when we started talking about our business park, when I was sitting here 10 years ago, we didn't attract institutional developers like that. We had all individual companies doing build-to-suits, like Herman Ultrasonics. One of the first big ones we got in was Greco, and then Rana. Then it kind of started snowballing from there. So we have a lot of institutional money flowing into Brewster Creek Business Park. I just named 3 of them here: Ridge Development, Logistics Property Company, and Connor Globe Commercial, which, by the way, has held the option on the very last large Cook County site for the past 2 years. So we do anticipate them coming in soon for their last $50 million building or so, for the last very large site in Brewster Creek. Now that they've leased, that's my next bullet point, they've leased their speculative building that they built last year to a company called Colony Display Company. Also, I sound like a broken record here to those of you who've been here a few years. This year, I almost am ready to promise that the building on Devon will be completed. I've been promised that it would be completed, but I said that last year too. We have, the good news is that building's about 120,000 square feet. It's divided into 3 units, and we have users lined up for all 3 if it can be completed within the next few months. So the last bullet point's the one we like. Sat here a few years ago saying, well, the vacancy rate in industrial is 20%, but don't worry about it. The reason I said don't worry is because I said, you know, this is part of the continuity of reviewing this every year, that those were 2 speculative buildings by a logistics property company that were 207,000 square feet each. And then there was the 436,000 square foot spec building. So we had about 800,000 empty square feet of industrial a little over a year ago, in addition to whatever else was vacant. So we were looking at about 1 million square feet of vacant space a year and a half ago. It's all been filled. In terms of commercial, we're also doing well. We're at 5%. And thinking about it while I was writing this up, there's just no getting around. It's a lot of these chronically vacant buildings. There's a small garage building behind JC's that's been empty now for about 5 or 6 years. We have a lot of lookers. Scott and I have offered full BEDA grants to some people to rehab it, but even with that, it's been looked at as too costly, not so cost effective to put that kind of money into it. So that one's vacant. Bartlett Tap is vacant as of today with some lookers still. And then there's there's a lot of the 5% vacant can be characterized as kind of scattered individual slots in various strip centers around town, and then these older buildings that are really hard, you know, have proven very hard to fill. I looked at it too, the Bartlett Town Center vacancy rate went up a little bit. The Allstate moved out. There's a COVID testing facility in there right now. Trackside Diner opened and closed within last year. And the Delicious space right across the street, we are working right now with a very strong prospect on that. So I would anticipate that getting filled this spring. But anyway, the town center vacancy rate ticked up a little bit last year. Speaking of COVID testing facilities, we had 9 of them at one point. Every place there was an empty slot, we saw one of those popping up. I'm not going to go on about it forever, but not all of them were fully licensed. So we did look into that. Maybe 1 or 2 closed as a result, but a lot of those have opened throughout the community. And I'm not going to speculate on how long the whole scenario is going to continue, but I still, no matter what, look at those as temporary uses. And I would say 5%, knock wood, it's a great vacancy rate. 10% is considered, you know, you start worrying when it gets a little bit over 10%. But having been in economic development now, I hate to say how long time, and knowing a lot of commercial lenders, they typically lend on shopping centers more or less assuming a 10% vacancy when they calculate the loans. So 10%, I look at that as a good kind of standard rate. Office, we don't have a lot. Again, every year I say that's good and that's bad. Why is it bad? Well, we don't have some office use in our downtown with 1,200 employees, where every day they go out for lunch and fill up and buy groceries and, you know, go to the cafes. We don't have, you know, an Allstate headquarters downtown or Molex or something like that. That's the bad part. And the good part is that a lot of my counterparts in towns such as Hoffman Estates spend pretty much all their time trying to fill millions of square feet of vacant former office complexes when they see places like Sears leave, or they see, you know, some major employer with hundreds or thousands. Northbrook has a lot of companies like that. So we don't have a lot. All told in the village, we have 286,000 square feet of office, basically the size of one good-sized office building. And the vacancy rate has been low. I just have to mention it because we always look at, you know, besides commercial and retail and industrial, have to look at office. The one thing I found interesting looking at it is that it's the lowest vacancy rate we've had. So If you were to ask me why, I would say I'm not really sure, except for maybe some satellites from bigger headquarters, maybe open smaller spaces, kind of scattered through the suburbs. And the average rate has gone up from about $24 a square foot to $27. So the office is doing well in Bartlett, and the rent is high. That's $27 per square foot. Jobs, can't look at indicators without jobs. It's improved over the past couple of years. It's improved dramatically over last year. Last year, the unemployment rate, as of a year ago tonight, was, what was it? I have it down here. It was about 7%, 6.9, and it's half of that now. It's 3.4. Bartlett, of course, is still mostly a bedroom community, so we have about 22,000 residents who leave the village and go work elsewhere, although it's my belief that a lot of them are working from home these days. And there's about almost 8,000 of people like myself who live out of town but work every day in Bartlett. And then there's about 1,000 people who both live and work in Bartlett. And again, that's for people with like jobs outside home-based type jobs. So, of course, we still have a large net loss, but I've looked at this 7 years now, and it's improved 7 years in a row. And it's going to keep improving. As long as our industrial continues as it has been, it's going to continue. And also I mentioned earlier, the fourth bullet point, if you can see that, I mentioned Colony Display. At least that entire building by Connor Globe, they're just getting ready to move probably this spring. So that should push our daytime population up over 10,000, which is a pretty good, you know, since we started looking at this and it was around 6 or 7, it kind of ticks up steadily year after year. That's why we like to get companies like the food companies and the manufacturers instead of just the warehouse. We have a lot of warehouse distribution centers coming. Those tend to be low employee counts. But anyway, we're getting up there around 10,000. And also, as I mentioned, the unemployment rate is extremely low. It's only about 3% in the village. Sales, basically identical from last year, up 2%. When I first saw the number of the village collecting $25.87, my first inclination was, oh, that's exactly the same as it was last year. So it was just a little bit up. Remember, this is we're talking from July of 19 through June of 20, comparing that to July of 20 through June of 21. So I'm not talking about through the Christmas sales season or something. I'm talking about that's the last information that the Illinois Department of Revenue is posting. But as long as we keep comparing apples to apples in terms of time span, you can see that sales have remained strong. Again, I can say that it's really no change. And why is that? Well, I'm going to knock wood again, we haven't had any major retailer leave. I didn't put in all the categories this year, so we wouldn't be here for hours talking about it, but the categories are the same. The drug stores, the home improvement, Home Depot, Jewel's, one of our biggest sales tax, obviously is our only grocery store. So the categories are the same in eating and drinking. We're here, most of the BEDA applicants you've seen are food related. That's one of the criteria, of course, to be sales tax producing. And so our sales in food and beverage have been very, very strong throughout the pandemic. And you know what? In a couple of years from now, we'll be talking about higher sales than this. I mentioned the Bartlett Auto Mall. That's a huge project. A village board approved a couple months ago, a Hyundai dealership, hopefully followed by a Genesis dealership. We spent pretty much all of 2021 working on that deal behind the scenes before we could go public with all the incentives and all the deals and the property tax incentive, and sales tax incentive. But that project alone is projected to generate, after a number of years, honestly, almost half of this entire number. Those are projections. They're projecting to reach the 100 million in sales mark over a period of about the first after 5 or 6 years. So we're talking about some serious sales. I'd love to sit up here and talk about 300 million in sales, but we're at about 258 million right now. Oh, I want to mention on a small scale, smaller scale than that, we're working with some retail developers, commercial developers on the west side of town. They're kind of in the initial phases now, but there's been a couple of people looking out that way and negotiating for land right across the street, or some of them right next to the new True North fuel station. We were hoping that development in that area would spur further interest, and it has. There's a lot of homes being built in South Elgin on the west side of 25, over 300, I believe. And there's some being built and completed, have been completed on the Bartlett side, and that is drawing the attention of some commercial developers these days. Population's about the same. It's all in the packet, by the way, your electronic and your paper packet. I included all the demographics, and there's not really a lot of change to report. The population number has remained pretty static. The Asian population continues to grow here year after year, and because of the general employment trends of being lower unemployment now, and a lot of companies having to compete harder and actually pay more for quality workforces these days, the average wages of both Bartlett residents and the jobs within the village of Bartlett have risen over the past year. In terms of adding to our population, there's a small subdivision called East Point Estates getting built right now by Bartlett High School. Scott and I went and looked at last week. We've got a potential apartment project that we've been working on for a very long time on what we call Site E at Railroad and Berteau. That would be 94 units, I believe, Scott. Is it 94? 94 unit, 5-story apartment building. There's renewed interest. Commissioner Perry doesn't have to ask me tonight because I'll tell him there's a home builder with renewed interest in the Crown site at West Bartlett Road in 59 that can possibly be over 200 additional homes. So our population report when the census came out was about the same as it was 10 years ago, but we believe we have the opportunity and likelihood to increase the population of the town in the next few years. Safety, another thing Bartlett's well known for. When we start talking again soon about our branding initiative, we talk about the safety of the town. Money Geek did a analysis that just came up, calculating cost of violent crimes and various types of property crimes. And Bartlett ranked the 5th safest in the country for what they call small cities, 50,000 and under, or 25 to 50, and second safest in Illinois per their rankings. So that comes up occasionally. I'll tell you when that's come up in my meetings over the past few years is mostly with industrial business owners talking about possibly running third shifts in the business park, and they have concerns with their employees leaving work at midnight. And we've sat, Scott and I, in rooms with them many times, showed them statistics like this, and basically tell them you don't have to worry at all if you have people walking outside by themselves at night in the business park or anywhere in town. It's not, no town is 100% crime-free, but in terms of kind of calculating that in as possible risk in your business decision, Bartlett essentially takes away that risk for the most part. So here we are telling you we've had growth, second or third year in a row I've told you that. You know, what are we going to do this year to continue this so we can give you an even better report next year. I won't say better in terms of vacancy rates, but maybe I'll say better in terms of higher daytime population, more industrial coming and filled. I didn't put this in here either, but I believe our number was 436 licensed businesses, which is an increase from last year. In this report, I don't go over every business that came and left, but you know a lot of small businesses have opened in streets of Bartlett. We have a comic book store about to open any day, just a few doors down from here. Elevate just opened in streets of Bartlett. We have some small businesses opened in the Zimmix building, a new haircut place. So a lot of small businesses. Wingstop just opened. So we've had probably a few more businesses open than closed over the last year. When you add in the industrial, because those are mostly new, that skews the number higher. So the number is 430. I looked at it today. I think it's 436. So it's, when we first started looking at this about 7 years ago, the number was around the low 300s. It was about 100 less than it is now. So what do? Broker blasts. Trade shows haven't picked up quite like they have, like we thought they would by now. But quite honestly, a lot of the businesses that have opened are really, we've shifted from really attracting most of our new business from things like trade shows and broker blasts to more internal, to having people like Rebecca move from a home-based business to opening up her own bakery. We've had most of the people you see, like Tony Passaro, like Bruce Suffern, a lot of these business owners are Bartlett entrepreneurial residents. So that's what the BEDA grant was meant to stimulate. And again, when Scott and I meet with them, something we didn't have when we started this analysis years ago, when they ask us, is there something the village can do to help? It might not, in some cases, be enough for them to take the plunge, but that 5 or 10 or 50,000 might be just enough for them to be willing to risk their own capital to do one of these projects. And you've seen we've been pretty successful in utilizing it. So I think over the next year, of course, what we'd like to see is more brewing get built. We would love to see that Le Petit move forward, the apartment building, possibly a new subdivision. There's other small businesses I'm not really bringing up tonight, but are looking at other parts of the town where we might start seeing BEDA grants out towards Army Trail Road, and we haven't had any out that way. So really, we're gonna keep doing what we're doing, but improving on it. And also the dealerships, I should mention, that's a huge one. And so we can continue to report and stimulate, and then later on report the economic growth. And hopefully bring some more good BEDA projects before you. So I just talked about almost a half hour straight about that, and I would be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
I'm just going to comment that, the fact that we've seen probably more growth from small, independent entrepreneurs, I think speaks well to the community that we're prepared to support them. There have been multiple reports recently, if you pick up Wall Street Journal or Cranes, that indicates that there are fewer people that are actually going back into the traditional workforce and opening their own businesses. Perhaps this is an opportunity for us to do somewhat of a casting call out to the community to again, highlight the benefit of the BEDA grant, and then certainly partner with the chamber to make people aware that just as we have had success in the business part, perhaps we could be somewhat of an incubator for those small businesses that may think about Bartlett as being a place to open a new business.
Perfect segue.
Yeah, we've actually are teaming up with somebody at the moment who's putting together a video about the BEDA program, and the participants that will be in the video will be somebody from staff, like Tony or myself, as well as 3 of the different businesses that have received BEDA money, talking about how the village supported their journey and things like that. So you should probably see that in the next couple of weeks, and we're excited
thank you.
about it.
That's terrific. Thank you.
We'll show that, we'll bring that to the EDC meeting for sure, when we have that. And that'll be one of our big calls out to all of you to share it as much as possible. Because each one of you sitting here and some of the commissioners not present tonight have some large networks, whether it's whatever profession you're in or business organizations. And, you know, we don't, Scott and I always talk about this. There's somebody out there right now, maybe just a mile or less from here, planning or thinking about doing something like this. And those are people we want to reach. That's some of the people that I think when we get local coverage on it, as well as using social media like our Facebook blasts and stuff like that, that really we are doing what we can to reach them. The one thing we don't want is an entrepreneurial Bartlett resident not knowing about it or going to a next town over to do something that we would like in our town. But we've been doing pretty well with that of lately, but you can always improve upon it for sure.
Well, and I think, you know, to the credit of staff, and I'm sorry that Joey's not here tonight, because when I reflect upon the success of the Marion Bright project under the heading of event marketing, I think that's certainly something that should be, you know, rolled into any presentation that you provide to these would-be entrepreneurs, partly because if there's an opportunity to demonstrate that, you know, we are doing everything possible to attract people into the town from outside of the community, I think it's helpful, and certainly we'll look forward to hearing about more initiatives that are parallel to Marion Bright for the spring and summer and fall. So, but I have another comment regarding, especially on the numbers of the residents that are actually working within our village, and then we've got that daily out migration of about 21,000.
Oh, 20,000.
So another report I read recently was relative to Metra in the greater Chicago area, and cities actually starting to plan for kind of a post-Metra, I guess a post-Metra workforce where people are actually going to, you know, rather than commuting back and forth, like into the city, for example, from Bartlett, and staying at home more. Is there a plan for us to more carefully manage that relationship with the metro properties, where we might open up more parking to our businesses, particularly as we look to expansion?
When you say open up more parking, what exactly do you?
Well, I know that we've got metro lots that have historically, not historically, but in the past, you know, maybe the recent 3 or 4 years, parking has been made available free to people that are coming down to it to enjoy the downtown businesses. And I think at one time it was like 6 or later, now I think it's 4 or later.
It's we changed it a couple years ago to 11 a.m.
Oh, 11, okay.
Yeah, so the whole Metro parking lot is free on weekends and free after 11 a.m. And that 11 a.m. time slot was decided based upon some of the restaurants and retail's opening time.
Great. So I know that sometimes the Bartlett, the metro lots, though, remain closed. And I think the comment that you had made at a previous meeting was that they remained closed for a cost-saving measures, and I'm thinking that perhaps maybe that was to avoid having to plow those lots. Is there consideration about opening those lots, and again, at least on the weekends? I can't imagine that Public Works is it's gonna cost us an arm and a leg, you know, to have the lots plowed on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Yeah, if there's a need for it, well, absolutely will. We want to open it.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're also, I meet with Metra several times a year, and we're also talking to them about, you know, the possibility of, they own some of the parking, we own some of the parking, and we're currently mapping out a strategy to open some of that up for development in the future.
Great. Thank you.
I'd just like to say on your comments about, marketing to the residents and everything, and the Merry and Bright campaign. I think that's really important as we get ready to do the chamber strategic plan. Michelle and I sat down and met with all the chamber board members, and we realized that while we always think business to business with the chamber, that's not the intent of every business, of every chamber member that's within the chamber with us. A lot of them are just there to be community support, so I think it's good for the business and for the village to look at reaching out to the residents as well and finding some of these entrepreneurs, because you really don't know who's your next business owner. I mean, we kind of had a narrow scope until we really started talking to people about like, oh, that's, okay, yeah, we need to look at like why are you here? What is your customer? So I think using Merry and Bright is a great way of doing that as well.
Thank you.
Well, appears to end our discussion on economic indicators. Moving on, any new business to discuss, Tony?
I don't have any additional new business tonight.
It should let you know, I know we've sat here for many years, and I've told you that more brewing is coming, they're coming, they're coming. Their building plans were approved on Friday. So that's really good news and a significant step forward. So that's just not hot air coming out of my mouth. They actually, building plans were approved Friday, so that's very exciting.
That's great news. I do have a question, though, about Bartlett Tap. In one of the slides, it had indicated that you've had some lookers, but there's some question as to how that building might be brought up to code. Wasn't there just a substantial investment done to bring the building to code?
There was a substantial investment on the lower level, including fire suppression, coolant systems, and a few other ADA. But if someone were to buy that building, which is what the seller wants right now, they're not looking at renters. If somebody were to buy that building, the upstairs is probably the roughest, most code issues of any building in Bartlett. So if someone is going to buy that, the investment needed to get upstairs habitable is pretty extreme.
Wow, that's sad, because I think that at one time was a residence, correct?
Yep, and I think I anticipate it will be again. I mean, especially when more brewing does finally come in. I mean, that property, it's troubling, but I think that success follows success, and we talk about how tides raise all boats, and I think once ground is broken on more, I think somebody's going to see that building as a real good opportunity. But yeah, there's things that needed to be done upstairs, and even the downstairs, when the BEDA was granted to get it to code, it's kind of all it did was get it to code. There are other advancements that needs to have. The previous owner pretty much did what they needed to do to pass. So if somebody wanted to operate a good, successful business downstairs, they can't afford to do the bare minimum. They're going to have to do more than that. So I'll say probably more than any other site other than the village-owned sites, we've pushed that more than anything, given its location in the center of the downtown and the iconic nature of it. Tony and I even have a set of keys and have tried brokering the property ourselves. I've spent a lot of time in there, so it's been frustrating, but it does have a lot of challenges, and then COVID and things of that had kind of got in the way, but we'll continue to try and push that.
Yeah, well, I'd hate to see anything, happen to it that shouldn't. I mean, it's a great part of Bartlett history. And then speaking of code, and fires, obviously the access fire out in the business park Any report on how that's impacted the other tenants out in that area? I know that the roads have been closed for a while and there was limited access. Is everybody good?
That's the main thing that I've heard. I mean, I haven't had a lot of communications about it, but that's been the main thing that I've heard. And obviously, they're pretty understanding about it. It's an inconvenience for the neighbors, but not, like a total devastation and loss of everything. So I think it's, a very unfortunate.
Well, thank goodness it was
Occurrence.
paper and not chemicals, so
But,
if there's
yeah,
a silver
I mean,
lining.
Yeah, I mean, at this point soon, everything will be cleaned up, done, empty, burned out shell, and then the other businesses are going to continue somewhat as usual, really. I'm sure it'll be a hard site. When I talk about all the entire vacancy and the low rate, I'm sure that's going to take several years to get something redeveloped on that property, I would imagine.
That building that lasted for 4 or 5 days, do they know how it started?
I mean, I don't have any extra information about the fire. I don't know if Scott, I only know the same things that you've all heard on the news.
There's a lot of rumors going around.
It's a building full of paper, it's gonna take some time to get out,
No, I don't have any extra information on how it started.
I understand there's a 30-foot safe in there that was not damaged by the fire. And being a document place, that was one of the places that they were putting their most important documents, of course. And I'd like to know what was in there for safe.
Well, there's certain documents that have to be stored in fire safety, like even at the bank, like safe deposit vaults, you have to have a certain fire rating in order to have it. So it has to be able to withstand so much temperature for so much time, and there's certain documents that must be in that type of environment, so.
Of course.
I'd like to go back to, you were talking about the chronically vacant type places, and the one that's kind of jumping out at me is the garage that's behind J.C.'s. And I'm curious if anything can be done to kind of help folks revisualize a different use of that building. Like, to me, okay, it's a garage, but it probably, since it's surrounded by restaurants, should be a restaurant. And how do you help people reimagine a potential use of that spot?
I can speak at length to that. I've probably worked with, and Scott knows about them, I would say 3 different restaurateurs looking at that. So getting a restaurateur interested in that is not a problem, or to reimagine what it could be.
Okay.
It could have been somebody sitting up here in the past few months talking about a $50,000 BEDA grant. What ended up happening with each one of these people was, without getting into, this is getting, very specific on this one property, but they were all coming up with ranges between 250,000 to 300 to bring it up to code.
Okay.
And I think people were rightly questioning the, that type of investment into that property, whether that could pay back, whether they could get a return on that type of investment. We both offered $50,000 BEDA grants to multiple restaurateurs, including some that you know, on that, and they've all decided to pass on it. I could sit here and rattle all the businesses that looked at it, but they all came to somewhat of the same conclusion. And I also will add, without getting into too great detail, the code violations of that building are myriad. And it's been in court more often than not. And also, to add one more wrinkle to a restaurant use, is it is a former garage, and it would require at least a phase one, probably phase two, and perhaps more investment under the building than inside the building. So I think when you take all those factors together, and does a restaurateur want to put $500,000 into bringing that up to code? There were some who were pretty close, but nobody who's done it. And I will just share that the village has had that in for condemnation before in court. So there's a long story. I don't think that's going to be.
I mean, there's a lot more people, a lot more creative than I, that can, reimagine things for what they could be and not just look at what it is and just say, oh, well, right?
Yeah. I mean, we've had those people, literally the very people we were talking about, Bartlett, top entrepreneurs with great visions for it, look at it. But as a finance professional, I know when you looked at the numbers, you would probably advise your client not to pursue it.
Sure.
Well, just out of curiosity, is that, because that building, again, historic, is that something that should maybe be looked at for maybe a private-public partnership? For example, the Bartlett History Museum, we've got the Arts in Bartlett. So rather than it being a for-profit, perhaps it's one of our not-for-profit ventures that, there's a foundation that kicks in, and the village supports that, and again, we get a foundation, because again, I think that would be a much more effective art center, for example, than wherever Arts in Bartlett had been tucked into at the town square.
I personally love that idea. I think it's fantastic. You got a few hurdles. One's the owner, and they pay the taxes, and they pay their court fines. So that's obviously, when you have somebody who's current on their taxes and their court-issued fines, it's a big hurdle. And we unfortunately don't communicate with the owner a lot unless we take them to court. So we've tried to work with the owners and try to push the owners and nudge the owners, but we've been pretty unsuccessful, unfortunately. But we'll continue to do it, and we'll find somebody at some point, hopefully sooner than later.
So that owner aside, is there a tax benefit to a not-for-profit? Should a more cultural center go into that building? Or would it still be beholden to, the rather erroneous Cook County taxes that the businesses pay?
I mean, I don't want to come off as professing to be a tax professional, but unless it's a religious institution or government-owned, then it's going to be subject to taxes. If Arts in Bartlett purchased it, they would still, as far as my understanding is, would have to pay property taxes on it.
A 501c3 does not pay taxes for real estate.
Okay, well, there's your answer. It is a tax
Yeah,
profession.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. They would still face the same hurdles that Scott mentioned with the ownership that, isn't the easiest to work with, and they would still need to bring it up to code. Maybe not to the same code that a restaurant would.
Right.
Right.
I mean, a restaurant's one of the biggest investments because of the ventilation, the grease traps, it has to be environmentally clean. It could be used as an office, and it has been used as an office without all the environmental work being done. And we have a commercial banker here too, and a banker would make a loan on an office use there, but probably, a food use would require a much larger investment.
Yeah, well, I know it was a fitness center at one time. The Slavens had, was it Women's Workout World? Or something like that? Curves, that's what, yeah.
we're not saying it's not going to be filled. We're going to say it's a chronic vacancy. It might, we wouldn't mind seeing a change in ownership over there. And we've offered, like I said, we've offered the full 50,000 BEDA to probably 4 or 5 different businesses. But the deeper they dug, the more they investigated it, the more they found that the cost kept mounting far beyond what they wanted to invest.
Well, I think we had at least an appetite to swallow whatever it cost to rehabilitate the Bartlett Depot. So I think that was to the tune of $500,000.
The Bartlett Depot, a lot of that was funded through grants.
Sure.
Oh,
That's the point of a public-private
right.
trust or a
Well, we'll be,
partnership,
yeah, we've got a few grant folks at the village that have certainly looked at that, and I'll reinforce that as well.
Great, thanks.
Well, if that ends the discussion on new business, there's only one more item left. That would be adjournment.
Motion we adjourn?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Yeah.
Meeting adjourned.
I had stopped.